How's it going, my curious bunch of bakers? Welcome to another video of the Principles of Baking series. Today, I'll show you how to use porridge in bread making. So let's get in the kitchen and get started. There are several methods which we can use to make our breads moister, softer, and longer lasting. We have covered most of them on this channel already. You can find videos about various dough improving ingredients like fat, sugar, and milk, and techniques like tangjong, yudane, scalding, the use of potatoes and other cooked vegetables, and various soakers, which are made with seeds and grains. But the one topic that we have not covered up until now is porridge. So in today's video, we'll be talking about some grains, seeds and pulses, how to cook them, and how to incorporate them in our recipes. Soakers and porridge are similar in makeup. It is the preparation method that is different. This is not a recipe video, so I will not be talking about the bread making steps here. Instead, while I'm preparing the bread, I'll talk about the principles behind this method. You will, however, find the written recipes in the link below the video. I'll be making 3 breads today. They will all contain white bread flour, water, yeast, salt, whole wheat flour, and olive oil. The only difference will be the grains used in the porridge. One will be made with whole grain basmati rice, one will be made with millet, and another one will be made with buckwheat. All 3 grains will be cooked at the same water to grain ratio, which is 1 to 2.5 by weight. The buckwheat and the rice take around 20 minutes to cook. The millet takes around 15 to 17 minutes. Once they're all fully cooked, we'll cool them down and then make some bread. And whilst I'm doing that, let's talk about porridge. Historically, grains and pulses have been added to bread dough to get more out of it. Flour has been expensive at times during history, so bakers had to use cheaper ingredients to keep the costs down. Most of us don't need to do this out of necessity anymore, but that doesn't mean that porridge is useless to the modern baker. It is quite the opposite. As with all the methods mentioned at the beginning of this video, we can use porridge to enhance our breads. We can create breads with unique textures and flavors, breads which can stay fresher for longer and even develop their flavors as they age. But what exactly is porridge? Porridge can be prepared from a variety of ingredients. When I say porridge, I don't mean your breakfast oatmeal, although that could be used in bread making. When I say porridge, I mean any grain, pulse, seed or legume that is cooked in liquid until all the liquid has been absorbed by it or evaporated. This is the main distinction between soakers and porridge. Soakers can be made with the same exact ingredients, but they are simply soaked, as the name suggests. Often more than enough water is used in the process. And if you know my recipes, then you would have seen me using all the water of a recipe for making a soaker. At the end of the day, soakers and porridge achieve the same results when used in a bread dough recipe. The main difference is the method of preparation and the convenience of one over the other, which can swing in either direction, depending on the type of bread being made and the type of grain or pulse used in the method. Since this video is about porridge, let's talk about the advantages of it. Since all the cooking liquid is absorbed or evaporated, we do not need to worry too much about adjusting the hydration of the recipe to which the porridge is added to. The porridge will release some moisture into the dough, making it slightly wetter, and it will interrupt the gluten structure, making the dough weaker, but we generally don't need to lower the hydration of the original recipe by much. Soakers, on the other hand, can be a little bit more involving, because the ingredients must be submerged in liquid to get soaked properly. As there is little to no cooking involved, some of that liquid will be left over, so when making a soaker, more often than not, you'll end up with grains or seeds with liquid still around them. Of course, you can try and drain the soaker, but even so, it will be a lot wetter than porridge. If you want to add the whole soaker to the recipe, then some major adjustments would need to be made to the hydration of that dough. So the ease of use is the main advantage of porridge. As I mentioned earlier, historically, a baker would just add some leftover groats or whatnot to the bread dough, and it would make a perfectly fine bread. Let's talk about how to prepare porridge. Any grain, seed, pulse or legume which can be cooked in a way that makes all the cooking liquid get absorbed and or evaporated can be used in the preparation of porridge. Oats, buckwheat, millet, lentils, bulgur wheat, barley, rice, farro, quinoa, freekeh, spelt, rye, and corn are just some of the most common ones. Some will absorb more water than others. When it comes to rice, buckwheat, millet, bulgur wheat, and other types of whole grains or seeds, the usual ratio of grain to liquid will be 1 to 2.5 by weight. So when cooking 100 grams of rice, you need 250 grams of water. Split pulses like lentils or rolled grains like oats may take less water, at a ratio of 1 part grain, 2 parts liquid. Of course, these are not rules, and it will very much depend. Best thing you can do is read the cooking instructions on the packaging and follow them. Porridge doesn't have to be made of just grains and water. You can get quite creative with it. Fragrant seeds like fennel seed, cumin, caraway or anise seed can be added to porridge for extra flavor. So can various spices and other types of seasoning and sweetening. Cooking times vary greatly, from the hardest whole grains like barley to the lightest split cereals like oats. The former taking up to an hour to cook, and the latter taking no more than a few minutes. But how much porridge should we add to our bread dough? When it comes to calculating the correct amount of porridge in baker's percentage terms, I only consider the raw grain instead of the total mass of the cooked porridge. As a general guideline, I would suggest to sticking to around 10 to 20% of raw grain, seed or pulse. Of course, this is not a rule and you don't need to stick to it. As little as 5% can be enough for some recipes and over 20% for others. It very much depends on the result that you are looking for, and it depends on the other ingredients used in the bread dough. If the hydration is high or the dough is weaker for any reason, then you may not be able to add very much cooked grains to it. On the other hand, if the original dough is pretty stiff and low hydration, you could add quite a lot of porridge to it. And that is about it when it comes to porridge. It's an old method that was born out of necessity, which we can use nowadays to create some unique and tasty loaves. And speaking of unique and tasty loaves, let's check in on our 3 breads. I cooked the buckwheat, the rice and the millet. I left them to cool down. I mixed up the 3 doughs. I left them to bulk ferment. I punctuated the bulk fermentation with 1 fold halfway through. I shaped the loaves. I scored them before the final proof. I covered them up, let them proof, and then baked them. These recipes are just here for demonstration purposes. They are as basic as it gets. Couple of things to note on dough handling when using porridge. It can make the dough a little bit sticky, not only because the porridge itself can be sticky, depending on the grain, seed or pulse being used, but also because it releases some of the moisture back into the dough. So be aware of that. You can use a little bit more flour when folding and shaping, or you can lower the hydration of the dough by a few percent. The hydration of these recipes was 66%, plus 3% oil on top of that. So technically, we could say that it's as if it was around 70%. Still, the doughs were not horrible to handle, especially because I did not adjust the hydration to account for the water contained in the porridge. I simply wrote the recipe first and then added the porridge on top of it, and I'm perfectly happy with the results. All the breads have pretty much the same consistency. They're very light and soft. The buckwheat has a great deep flavor. The rice is pretty plain, adds a nice texture, and the millet added a nice sweetness to the loaf. But tell me, have you ever used this method? What ingredients do you use in your porridge, and what recipe do you add it to? Share it in the comments below. And if you are interested in more videos like this one, covering the principles of baking, head over to the Principles of Baking playlist if you haven't been there already. It contains all you need to know about bread making, especially if you're a beginner. And check out all the other playlists for delicious recipe ideas. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.